Hi, you're welcome back, and I'm glad to report my videos are getting a reasonably good showing, depending on whether they're indoors or outdoors. Outdoors seems to be very popular. But anyway, I want to deal with one little matter here, and this is on immigration, but it's also on climate change and temperature. The highest temperature ever recorded on the world was 56.6 degrees centigrade, and it's all centigrade I'm giving you here, at Death Valley in America, southwest United States. On the 30th of September 2012, there was 58.66 recorded in Libya. It turned out that a young operator who was new to the job made a mistake. That was not true. It wasn't deliberate fraud. It was just a mistake that was made. The highest in Africa was 55 degrees, the highest in Oceania was 50.7, and the highest in Europe was 48 in Greece. Okay. Now, I particularly mention Iraq here because the highest ever in Somwa was 48.6, in Basra it was 43.3, and in Baghdad it was 37 degrees centigrade. Now in 2015 the temperature did go up to 51 degrees, but that was 2015, not 2016. And so it gets hot there. Now I was out in Oman one time on a visit, and it was hot. It was in early November. It was like the hottest summer day here you'd get in Ireland, and they have about 600 mile of beaches and no one swims in them. They're used as a dump. They're used as a landfill. I was warned when I went to go in for a swim that there was broken bottles, broken pieces of metal, all kinds of things, including cement blocks and everything in there, and that nobody ever swam there. So it just shows you the difference in culture. But there is freshwater wadis where the water comes out of the mountains, and everyone goes there and they have a great time. It's lovely. It's kind of an oasis sort of an idea. But it's always down along the coast, apparently, as far as I could see. So anyway, the heat, it's hot there, and that's a fact. And of course, that's an area where we get quite a lot of migration from the Middle East. And the attitude of our politicians to this migration, which is of great concern, and which is set to change our entire Irish culture, our Irish demography, our population and everything permanently, is a great concern to many people, including me. Now I'd like you to watch this clip here, and I'm going to put the camera on hold. So
very much. The Green Party would also support, or does support, the contents of that motion, looking for us to accept, among other things, 200 unaccompanied minors from the Calais camp as a signal of our intent. And I hope that the ministers, who I also think someone says previously are not without compassion or without concern on this issue, I hope that we will be able to get agreement and see that motion put into action and agreed next week. I believe, I suppose I would say this, but I think there was a significant development last year in the signing in New York of the Sustainable Development Goals. I think they are a manifesto for a sustainable future. And what's important about them is that they apply to the North as well as the South. They bring, which is so clearly true from our own party's perspective, ecological sustainability and social justice together. Those 15 goals addressing gender issues, addressing education, addressing water, they bring a combined approach. And the benefit of that approach, they bring a global approach, and that's the way for us to go. And I think actually by applying that, it not only shows a responsibility from the south to the north to the south, but also creates a society here where we can bring in people. We have to start planning for being an island of 10 million people, and among that, bringing in people as refugees in scale, not just 200, but a much larger number than that, and managing it as we do. I would agree with what Deputy Wallace and others have said. We have to stop and have no more wars for oil, because so many of the people who are refugees are coming because of the long-term addiction to fossil fuels and the geopolitical arrangements that were put in place to protect that oil supply. We need to start a war on climate, because a lot of the people are coming from Eritrea, Sudan, the Middle East, other areas where the actual climate refugees are going to become the biggest issue, and one we have to manage, we cannot ignore. It was 53 degrees in Baghdad on a regular basis this summer. 53 degrees, that's barely habitable. And unless we start that war, all our efforts here would be to no avail, because we will be not causing the root cause of the problem. I have friends, good friends here, refugees who arrived here, and they always said the same thing when I talked about it. Said, do you think I would have wanted to leave my own home, my own Eden that they came from? No. We have to protect that Eden in their home and in our home as the ultimate long-term response each week, as well as taking people in here. So I hope we can reach agreement next week. I commend the volunteers, Irish volunteers and others who are in the front line doing brilliant work. I commend the people who drafted that motion which has prompted this debate here tonight. I look forward to us agreeing it hopefully next week. Thank you.
Now folks, you'll have heard that. That was Eamon Ryan, the leader of the Irish Green Party. He's elected in South Dublin. And I had occasion to go on the train from Dublin city centre out to Bray this week, and I saw all the houses along the railway station there, and I wonder, will the people there, who elect him, do they believe there'll be sea level rise, and why aren't they selling their houses and fleeing? I see them all very comfortable there, and I don't think there's any bargains to be had at the minute. So if they really believe in climate change, you'd think the price would be dropping, wouldn't you, there? But it doesn't seem to be. Now, so what we see there is Eamon Ryan glossing up the data. There is no record of 53 degrees. There was one in 2015 of 51, but there's no record of 53. But it never loses anything in the carriage. It never loses anything in the carriage. So I just wonder what would happen if we didn't have the internet and could do research. We'd be told all sorts of fake news about the climate. Luckily, today we have access to records, but they would add, and we'd be getting 60 and 70 degrees centigrade from the proponents of the climate change theory. Now, he made no word of violence. He says they're fleeing from climate change. Why would anyone flee from climate change? How is climate change? He makes the point these wars are over oil. But there was no oil back in the time of the Crusades, and there was still violence over there. So everything's blamed on climate change. The next thing is then, we know here in Ireland already, I know from looking at the provision centres and the hotels where they're all over Ireland, they're nearly all men. Nearly all men of fighting age that are supposed to be fleeing. Why would you not think they'd stay at home and try and make an impact on their own political situation? There was nothing in Ryan's speech about selection. Just to make it clear, there are 5.6 million people on the island of Ireland, and he wants to bring that up to 10 million. Don't be in any doubt about that. That's what he wants. He mentions globalism. He sees it as a solution to the Irish border. He has it all wrapped up. From looking at the fellas I see coming here from all these countries, there's two things you'll always notice. They're heavy smokers and they love cars. So if they think they're going to get cars off the road, the last ones that will probably want to see them going is the migrants. The Irish will probably go on foot all right. That's the kind of them. They seem to accept anything. We noticed recently there was a protest in Oughterard, and a direct provision centre was stopped. They were going to put all these migrants into Oughterard. They weren't going to put them in Castleknock or in Eamon Ryan's own constituency. The whole idea is bung them all down to the paddies down the country. They've already driven the farmer out. The beef farmer at least has been driven out. Now they're going to drive the people out. They have taken out our post offices, our banks. Everything's gone. There's nearly nothing left in rural Ireland. And this is the plan Mr. Ryan has. And don't forget, with the exception of Matthew McGrath, Mick Fitzmaurice and the two Healy Rays, this is the policy of every single member of the political establishment and political parties in this country. So there was success in Uachtarard because Uachtarard doesn't want this imposed without any debate, without any vote or anything. It's just been imposed by Angela Merkel, and Leo Varadkar just trots after and turns up and asks her would she like to rub his belly for him, and that's all you get. That's the same with Simon Coveney and them all, and all of the politicians anywhere, Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael, Sinn Féin. They want the Brits out and the whole of Africa in, and people before profit and solidarity. All of these people, all of them want this. Now, I'll give you a very simple example here on 11 minutes. There was a lady called Assi Noreen Bibi, and she was about in her mid-30s, and she was a Catholic Christian woman in Pakistan, and she was poor, and she had children and a husband, and she went to work picking fruit, and the Muslim women that were there kept constructively harassing her. And on one occasion they sent her to the well to get water for a drink, and when she came back she filled up the cups using a ladle that was in the well, and they wouldn't drink the water because they said it was unclean, coming from an infidel, a non-Christian, a non-Muslim, which I am. I mean, to them I'm a nobody, and they wouldn't drink it. And then one thing borrowed another, crowd of women in the field, what would you expect? And they conjured up what I believe was false evidence to say that she committed blasphemy against the Prophet Muhammad. Now, I suppose I can't complain. We only got rid of the blasphemy law here a couple of years ago, and I have to give credit for that. But in Pakistan, it's very much there. And she reported to the local mullah, and he reported to the police, and she was tried on the word of two spiteful women, and she was sentenced to death by hanging. And she went through the whole appeal process, and the lawyers were intimidated, and two people lost their lives over trying to defend her. And finally she managed to get a lawyer who had to flee to Holland, to the Netherlands, and he managed to bring the case to the highest court in Pakistan, and one of the judges stepped aside and allowed the main judge to decide, and the main judge decided that there was insufficient evidence. He didn't deny that she'd have to be executed by hanging if it was true, but he said it was too risky, there wasn't enough evidence, and the mullah gave evidence, but he wasn't there. So it was everyone out to do her. So he acquitted her, but he insisted she stay in the country pending other procedures and other appeals. The whole of the population ran riot. They rioted everywhere. They couldn't accept it. And the next thing was she was kept in prison for her own protection. And they went looking for someone to take her. And Spain offered to take her, but it was too dangerous there because her life was in danger, too hard to protect her. France offered to take her, and the same there. It's really gone to hell. It's really bad there with migration. Britain was asked, because they had minded Salman Rushdie a while back. So Britain was asked to take, would they let her in and let her come in, and maybe let her family in, her children and her husband. And Theresa May, the previous Prime Minister, refused her admission and said she didn't want to upset British people, which means the Muslim population of Britain. She refused a Christian woman into a Christian country asylum. And a man called Paddy Manning, what's known as an internet blogger, Brendan Howlin, surprisingly, Brendan Howlin of the Labour Party asked the Irish government to allow her in. And the next thing was I sent emails and I implored the Fianna Fáil party and my local Fianna Fáil representative to do something. Please let her in. I was hoping that she would maybe come to Kingscourt and come up to our church and let her local parish priest, Father Johnny McCormick, say Mass, and she'd have Holy Communion, and we'd be delighted to see her and welcome somebody that, after all, was several years in a dingy, hot Pakistani prison, awaiting to be executed by hanging, and who had decent people die trying to prevent this injustice. Well, what did the Irish government do? This is the island of saints and scholars. They wouldn't entertain her at all. They would not even consider letting her in. Okay? So myself, Brendan Howlin, and this man, Paddy Manning, are the only ones I know of who tried to do something and get her in. But she was refused admission. Right? And the very same Irish government is now almost certainly going to let in the ISIS brides. Young ones that went over and lay down with these ISIS terrorists who beheaded people, and the most brutal people you could get. And of course they get pregnant and they want to come back to see Mammy and have their baby over here. Yet we wouldn't let in a poor, unfortunate Christian woman. And the good news is Canada finally accepted her, and she's gone to Canada, and the best of luck to her. If she's seeing this, how are you, baby? I am very, very sorry for the way our so-called Christian Irish country treated you, and we should be ashamed. And I say it again, the people who refused her were Fine Gael, Fianna Fáil, not Labour. We have to exclude Labour. Brendan Howlin made the point, and we have to presume he had the sanction of his party. Sinn Féin, she wasn't getting in here. No, no. And People Before Puberty and Prophet, or whatever you call them, and Solidarity. All except the Healy Rays, Mick Fitzmaurice and Mahi McGrath. I have no doubt they would have loved to see her coming in, because I know them very well. But the point about it is, Eamon Ryan wants to double the population of this country. He has no assessment, no more than his other energy things. He has no, this was never put to us in a vote. And he's getting the vote from Dublin South. And they're going to continue to vote for him there. And unless we in the country start rejecting the mainstream policies and put in a counterbalance, we need a rump of rural politicians to balance up Ryan and to attack him there in the Dáil in a vigorous fashion and challenge them everywhere they go. I personally challenged him, and he wasn't up for debate at all. He wasn't even at the races when it came to debating, and it's the same for his other TD. Shamefully, the Irish people have put these Greens there, but at least they're honest. You know what they're going to do. Whereas with the rest of the politicians, they're going to bring in this globalism, cultural Marxism, massive migration. They're doing it every day. And I believe that a certain amount of the Irish public will reject the politicians who do it. I know there's a certain amount of old phobies. They vote for Fine Gael, Fianna Fáil, Sinn Féin and the rest of them, even if it was a donkey to put up with the party banner round their neck, they'll vote. We can't do anything with them people. But we can try and say and advise, this is what's happening. Imagine in Christian Ireland, in the country where I was indoctrinated into the Catholic Church, and we were told about the Gospel of Matthew 25:45, where Christ said, I was hungry, you refused to feed me. I was thirsty, you refused to give me a drink. I was naked, you refused to give me clothes. I was sick, you refused to visit me. And I was in prison, you refused to help me. And all the great and the good, all the Opus Dei, all the Knights of Columbanus. We are the big Catholic elite. Yeah. Well, they then asked, when did we ever do the like of that? And he said, for I tell you, when you refuse to help the least of my brothers and my sisters. And that's what Assie Beebe was. You refused to help me. So at least myself and Paddy Manning and Brendan Howland, we did try to help. And we did the best we could. So it's a bloody scandal. And if you're not mad at it now at this stage, you should be. And if this goes on, we're finished. We're finished as a country. 5 years at most, and we'll not even know. We'll be strangers in our own country. And you know something? It's a pity it's a few of us that have to put up with it. But a lot of them deserve it. A lot of them deserve it. Hopefully, anyway, something will be done and we can put an end to that. So, look, thank you very much for looking in, and we'll see you back for another videos. So we're not against migration. Up until about 2002, the Gardaí supervised migrants into this country. There was no problem. The Department of Justice supervised them. Very few people were sent home. And you'd have a much fairer system if you had that. We are looking at a points system. There's various ways. It's part of the reason why Britain is pulling out of the EU. And it has to be tackled. And only by changing the politicians. You will never ever change their opinion. You got to change them. Hopefully we'll get a couple in at some stage. I don't know whether we will or not. All I can do is try. So thank you very much, and we'll see you back for the next clip soon. Thank you.